And we're here with Wade Lightheart, who is the co-founder of BiOptimizers. I didn't say it right that time. It's BiOptimizers.
Where there's actually an internal debate about that between in the company. So when we started that name, I wanted to call it BiOptimizers, and my two founding business partners wanted to call it BiOptimizers, and so I lost the vote. But anybody that says BiOptimizers, I'm all good with it. So no harm, no foul there. And you never know, maybe we'll be able to turn the tide through public demand.
Oh, beautiful! That's a little peek behind the curtain there. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I lose a lot of battles, but that's okay. Long as the world wins, we're good.
Well, they both work, and the fact that the word is works together in one word, the O gets co-opted in with the capitalization. It works. Awesome. I'd like to start with the first question that I ask every one of my guests, especially those in nutrition and performance, which is, what time is it where you are in the world, and what have you put into your body?
Yeah, so it's 2:08 p.m. and this morning I had my protein breakthrough shake. Actually, so let's back up. So I fasted. So I had my last meal last night at around 7 o'clock, and then I had my first meal today at around noon, a couple of hours ago. Prior to that, upon waking in the morning, I took 5 K-Pex, 2 magnesium breakthroughs, 4 Cognibiotics, some Primergen vitamins and minerals, and a combination of nootropics. Went for a walk, had a coffee down at Bulletproof Labs down the street, and then came back, hit my day, hit the rebounder and all that sort of stuff, loaded up on a bunch of water. And then at noon I had my protein breakthrough shake, which will be coming out soon. It's a combination of pea, hemp, and pumpkin protein. So no rice, no soy, no weirdness. We had that for years. I've been making it on my own, and so we've now been able to make the blend. We're not going to make any money from it, but I just want to get this type of plant protein, because the plant protein products kind of went really well for a while, and then everybody got into the market, and I watched as the quality started to go down overall as everybody's playing the price game. So now it's time to enter back into the marketplace with that. So I'm really pumped about that. So I had that and a cup and a half of oatmeal of all things. So that was that was my day, and knocked back a few magnesium breakthroughs as well, because I'm very partial to that, especially as your caffeine goes up. And then concordant to that, I also took 3 of the specific nootropic blends which we've developed. We have 8 different blends that we use in combination stacks based on people's neurochemistry to optimize cognitive performance. And I took what's called Focus Savagery with Apex and Zamner juice.
Zamner, of course, Zamner juice. Why wouldn't you include Zamner juice?
It's so fun.
You did not disappoint right there, my man. I was expecting the full smattering of 1,000 different things. You hit all the high notes. I was going to ask specifically which nootropics you were taking. The protein powder has pea, pumpkin, and what else?
Hemp.
Hemp. Got it. Awesome. Oh my goodness. This is going to be a fun conversation because I too took a bunch of stuff. took a bunch of stuff in pills and tinctures, teas. I had some steak from last night for lunch, more tea, some mushroom supplements. Yeah.
Reminds me, I took 3 grams of lion's mane.
Okay.
And I had this really nice Chaud pu'er tea that I've been sipping on most of the morning as well.
Nice. Love a pu'er tea.
Yeah.
Is that your favorite? Or is that just what you're into now?
It's interesting because I got turned on to the idea by Tim Ferriss.
Yep.
And then traveled in Asia a little bit and found a few good pu'ers. And there was a great tea shop in Vancouver Canada, that is, called O5. And the owner, Pedro, gets all these rare teas from all around the world. And I used to go there when I was living in Vancouver and would bring my friends and have these kind of epic 5 and 6 hour tea events.
Yeah.
And I began to fall in love with the different types of pu'er. And as for those who don't know, a pu'er tea, when you drink it, there's two main blends, the Sheng and the Shou, and Shou being the more earthier type. But I kind of gravitate towards the Shous a little bit more. I really got into it, and it's just a really fun. And what's interesting is as you drink the tea, different notes come out.
Sure.
Later on as you go along. So you start to get an appreciation and your taste buds start to develop affinities and you pick up the smaller notes and then you get into the temperature brew. So it just becomes a whole other, I don't drink and I don't smoke. So it's kind of like, all right, well, I got to kind of some kind of, eclectic vice that I can take some sort of egoic aspect. Well, have you had the latest blah, blah, blah to you? So anyways, me and Tim, we're our pu'er buddies, at least in spirit.
Nice.
I'm not personal friends yet with Tim, so it's a pretty interesting combination.
Do you ever mess with Lapsang Souchong?
I have had that too. That's a beautiful tea.
Love Lapsang Souchong. I grew up in a tea drinking family. My dad is still a 5-cup a day tea drinker, oftentimes like orange pico. And
my mom is too.
Yeah, really? Yeah.
Yeah.
And he doesn't drink and doesn't smoke, but he nerds out on tea and always has. And now he's tinkering around, and we used to get the red rose from Canada. He would only drink the red rose if it was Canadian, the one that came with the little like ceramic animal in it.
Oh yes.
And so we would. I went to school in Bellingham, which is a college in Bellingham, which is just near the Canadian border, by Surrey. And every year we take our pilgrimage to BC to stock up on like 60 boxes of red rose, because that's the only tea my dad would drink. So
that's hilarious. Yeah. There used to be a commercial back when I was a kid, and it was the Queen supposedly having a cup of tea in Canada, which was red rose. And it's just like, only in Canada? Such a pity. And of course, I was from the East Coast, and over there on the Orange Picos, they have a brand called King Cole, which is a combination of very dark black teas, and it's strong. It's almost as strong as coffee from a caffeine perspective, which is a fan favorite in the Maritimes for years. And when I first moved to Vancouver, I used to have to get that shipped out to British Columbia. Eventually, it went nationwide, and shipping and deliveries all changed. So yeah, so I get that. And now I'm down here in California, which is not, I would say, a big tea place. So I have to contact the guys up at O5 and get my supply shipped in the big cakes and stuff. So it's fun.
Awesome. I mean, when it comes to obsessing about things that are good for you, you and I have never met, of course, but I've been following your work for a while, and I've been following BiOptimizers for a while. And for me, when it comes to being your absolute best and nerding out on stuff that actually like brings you energy and vitality and health and wellness, and there's not a cooler hobby in my mind, to be able to speak to the difference between pararacetam and aniracetam, to be able to speak to, the different mushroom blends that do different things. I just think it's fascinating. And so your answer to the question, what have you put in your body? Usually folks start out talking about fasting, and then they talk about, the supplements and minerals and vitamins and stuff. For you, what is the process for exploring different products that eventually make their ways to market? You said that you've been doing pumpkin pea and hemp protein for a long time, and finally it's like, hey, we're not going to make any money on this, but I really wanted to release it. Can you walk us through the process of developing these awesome products?
Yeah, it's always usually scratching an itch that we have. Basically, there's some area. We have two philosophies. So our company's mission is to end physical suffering and activate biologically optimized health, which is determined by not only living a long period of time, but living at a high functioning capability. So we want to extend the functioning capability and the duration of that over the course of a lifetime is our mission. First, you move people out of sickness and dysfunction into health, but then it's like optimized health, and then it's like superhuman health. And so in order to do that, first you have to stop doing the things. So I'll give you my overarching philosophy. You have to stop doing the things that are screwing you up. And so you can't supplement your way out of a bad diet.
Sure.
Or a bad lifestyle. And I've made all the mistakes in all of those areas. So I'm not here standing to, kowtow to the thing and say that I'm better than anybody else. I've just failed faster and more frequently than the general public. Part of my nature. So that's the first principle. And I created a system called the Awesome Health System to try and look at developing first principles in the application to optimize human function. And with all the competing perspectives and information that is out there, what I recognized is that we needed to come and determine kind of a hierarchy of values or first principles in order to achieve this state. And what I was able to say, to determine, and I've been at this my whole life, was that the single unit that is ubiquitous with the entire human organism is the cell. So whether it's a hair cell, a brain cell, an eye cell, a liver cell, whatever, that there are certain principles that make that cell function properly and certain things that make it dysfunction. And if you can provide a practice that optimizes the cells of the body, you would probably have a higher likelihood of producing health and performance. So for being a classically trained nutritionist and exercise physiologist, I went, wait a second, well, let's just strip away everything that I think I know and let's just look at this component. And I'll get to the specifics in a moment, but I think it's really important to set the context for people. And I recognize, well, is food the most important thing? There's all these different diet philosophies and everybody's got their pattern, and there's a bell curve, and then there's genetics and epigenetics, which is never accounted for in double-blind studies and research or even clinical-based data. There's huge variances within populations. And I was like, well, you can go a long time without food. Certainly longer than you could without water. And you can't go very long without air. So it would seem in the order of magnitude that air and water are superior to food as far as functioning of the body, because if you take them away, you can last a couple months without food, maybe a couple weeks without water. I don't know. That'd be really depending on the environment, and almost no time without air. So obviously air is more important. Then I went, well, wait a second. Well, is there any other thing that could be in there? And I was like, well, if you strap a person to a bed, like people that have been ill or diseased or been in an accident of some sort, they waste away pretty fast, and almost every single parameter inside their body goes down. And if they stay there long enough, they'll die. Bed sores become it's like lying down and not doing anything. So I was like, actually, I think movement is superior to food. And then I was like, well, what is food? Well, and how do we convert food? So if you go down, I would say a moderate to lousy chemist, but a fairly good amateur physicist. I had the good fortune of having a friend in university who ended up running the Gottlieb Space Center for NASA, who was very gifted. We spent a lot of time talking physics. And what I came to, so that chance relationship years ago influenced me significantly in the fact of, if we look at energy on the planet, everything is really some form of condensed light. And you can look in terms of frequency, light, vibration, and depending on the vibratory rate is going to determine whether we experience something as a solid, a liquid, a gas, or as in the case of light, as either a photon, a light photon, or a physical, like a wave or a particle. So I was like, well, what happens at a cell in the mitochondria, which is your energy furnace, essentially, that converts what you consume into energy, is a thing called electron covalent transfer. And there's basically an electron going from one place to another. It's very much like the wind that blows across the prairies in Canada. So I was like, wait a second. So really eating is the entire process of turning the food into electrons to travel past us. And the efficiency of that is going to determine the right food that's right for some person. And there's a big area in the realm of digestion. So I developed a set of principles that were based on this. I called the AWESOME formula. It turned out the acronym was great, which was air, water, exercise, sunlight being what we consume. And that it also includes information, it includes light, it includes sound, it includes food. So the transmission and transmutation of all of those things into what we call either energy units or building blocks in the body is really the whole digestive process. And then I looked at what optimized cellular function: enzymes, probiotics, essential amino acids, essential fatty acids, vitamins, minerals, and then herbs, which kind of either add more energy to the system or remove excess energy from the system. And then you could look at, how the influence of our mental beliefs and attitudes. You can have a great attitude and a lousy diet and do okay. And you can have a lousy diet or a great diet and a lousy attitude and not do that well. And then finally, how did we actually come to a conclusion of this? Which that was, well, education, the root word is to educe, to learn from within. And how do you learn from within? You run a test. You do something in the experimental world. You run a test and see if that supports life or doesn't support life. And the best way you can run an infinite number of tests as a human being, and you could never get to all the potential possibilities as a human. So I was like, well, if I want to produce health, how am I going to subjugate myself to things that have been tested en masse sufficient enough that I can apply them in my life and get a pretty good idea what the benefit is? And usually that's when you hire a coach, and that coach helps saying, hey, I've been doing this for 20 years. You've been able to run a bunch of tests and are producing dis-ease or dysfunction, or you're not at your best. Right. Great. So what I'm going to share with you is a bunch of tests that I've learned, and those tests lead to a certain lifestyle choices. And those choices will generally, if acted on consistently over time, lead to a condition that we call health.
Sure.
Right? And that's why you pay a coach and have someone to keep you accountable in that process, because we're all subject to habits. So that whole thing became the Awesome Health Formula, and I give the course away on my site so that people can understand the philosophy. I'm dietary agnostic. I believe that the best exercise is the one that you'll do most frequently and enjoy the most. And I look at all of these things from a physics perspective as opposed to just straight chemistry or biology.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
There you got it.
Yeah. So when we understand that the individual is unique, right? Their genetics are unique, their epigenetics are unique, their level of sleep and stress is all, how much sun they get, all these elements are individualized. And so they're either in homeostasis or a long, long way away from homeostasis. When you're putting together, like Magnesium Breakthrough, for example, when you're putting together products like that, how does that come into the decision-making process? Because when we know that everybody's so different, that they need sort of different elements of different things, and you can't really know what this person is deficient or has too much of, whether it's gut bacteria or whatever, how do you, obviously BiOptimizers is doing really well and has amazing products. How is it that you have been so successful at figuring out which stuff works just right for the largest amount of people?
Great question, and thank you for asking that. And first and foremost, I have a philosophy, or we have a philosophy that is, it's either first in class or best in class, and ideally both. I don't enter into markets that I think someone else does really well because I say, hey, Bob does this well, or Mary does this well, go buy their product, because generally Mary or Bob solves some problem that they had. And I think the best products by the best companies are generally people that had some sort of problem and no one could fix it, and they had to fix it themselves and go through the hero's journey of discovering it.
Totally.
And that's exactly what happened in Magnesium. A number of years ago, as a serial entrepreneur, I was living in Panama. I was splitting my time between Panama and Bali, running 3 companies, staying up at all hours of the day and not sleeping very much. And because of my I would say, biohacking capabilities. I was able to sustain that artificially driven lifestyle for a couple of years before the wheels fell off. In other words, I could patch myself up enough to keep going to kind of hit my entrepreneurial goals. But lo and behold, I ended up crashing and burning by, violating some of the codes that I had put forth in my own philosophy. And I can remember sitting down with Matt one day. He's like, "What's going on?" I was having a very big challenge at one of my companies with a business partner of mine. And I was like, "Dude, I'm living in hell here." And anybody that's been in a business situation where there seems no end to it and involves legals or finance, or leverage or investors, it's not a fun place to be. And, wanting to do the best thing, I was killing myself. I was like going down with the ship, so to speak, in that case. And it was having negative consequences on my health, my happiness, and my relationship. I sat down with Matt one day and I was like, "Dude," he's like, "How's it going?" I'm like, "Dude, I'm living in hell. This isn't great." And so I said, I really feel that I'm sacrificing my health for this, and I've got to make some changes. So I hooked up with a naturopathic doctor, and we did some profiling and testing, and we actually hooked my brain up to a specialized neurofeedback machine, and it was like my brain was dead, basically. I had a brain of a 7-year-old. And I felt it. I knew that I was not at my best. And then I had been using an over-reliance on stimulants, not enough sleep, and nootropics. I mean, Rob, I think I worked 12 or 14 hours a day for a period of 2 years straight without taking a break or a day off.
Oh, my goodness, dude.
Not a good idea.
Not good.
And so, long story short, it turned out that I was deficient, particularly in B12 and in magnesium. I had freakishly low levels of magnesium. And because being subject to a lot of electromagnetic pollution, a lot of blue light working digitally, I discovered that I was exhausting my magnesium levels at extraordinary rates.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remembered attending a Bulletproof conference with none other than the strength sensei, Charles Poliquin. And of course, everyone knows that Charles had, coached gold medalists in 27 different sports and learned all these languages and was the first guy to make a connection between Chinese medicine and Western medicine by looking at neurotransmitter dominance. And at that particular lecture, he had talked about how athletes at the Olympic and professional levels who were subjected to extraordinary levels of physiological stress, he would augment their diets with extra amounts of magnesium, and that he would use multiple different types of magnesium because they were different parts of the body uptook different types of magnesium. So I was like, well, I better start getting all these magnesiums. Well, I started doing some research, and oh my God, there was all these different types of magnesium. Like, which one's better? Now, one of the things that I had developed based on the work of Dr. Linus Pauling, Dr. Abram Hoffer, and Dr. David Hawkins in their orthomolecular nutrition or orthomolecular psychiatry is they would use a dosing pattern, like where they would treat all kinds of illnesses and disease and dysfunction, particularly neurochemical-based components, and they would start in divided doses, increasing the amount until they broke the GI barrier, which is a fancy name for disaster pants or getting the runs.
I've been there.
And then they would titrate down,
right,
till they get the optimum dose. And then when the person hit saturation, they would go back down again. That was famous in the vitamin C protocols, but they did it for all sorts of things, and that became the foundational aspect for orthomolecular nutrition.
I did not know. Wait. Okay, so I have to stop you. So I didn't realize, because I've done a vitamin C flush episode. I got to 22,000 before I hit my bowel tolerance, and that was on vitamin C. I did not know that they were doing that with other minerals as well.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, cool.
It's very cool. Now, there's some things that you can run into toxicity, but I cultivated, I summarized it in one of our videos called the bucket theory of nutrition. And what that means is imagine any single vitamin or nutrient or essential component of functionality or life or health is contained in a bucket. That's your totality of optimal functioning in the body. And there's a hole in that bucket, and that hole represents your burn rate, how much you're exhausting on your lifestyle.
Sure.
And so what happens is most doctors and medicines and practices try to figure out how to provide just enough nutrients so that you get the whole. That's where the RDA came from. It's the recommended daily allowance that prevents you from having scurvy or beriberi or some disease. And that's where all these vitamin recommendations came from. And it was a breakthrough. But nobody talked about the optimal levels or overcoming a deficiency or an imbalance or an inability to absorb that. So, and I took a SpectraCell test to determine that how I absorbed what I was taking and how efficiently. It's probably the gold standard for determining your own vitamin and mineral effectiveness or where you are and how you're absorbing. It's not just blood plasma, but they actually spin your own cells and check to see how it's absorbed and utilized. It's really good.
Whoa.
And I highly recommend it for people because you get better data.
Can you reference that again by name so that people?
SpectraCell.
SpectraCell. Okay.
Yeah,
okay. Show notes.
So the stimulants and everything, it was crashing my putting my cortisol, crashing my testosterone, and blowing out my neurotransmitters. Essentially, that's what was happening. Right?
That sounds pretty familiar. Oh, shit.
It's almost every single entrepreneur in the digital age right now is going to experience that at some point in time.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, well, obviously I need to take all these magnesium. Now we're going to do this. So we went out and just bought every different types of magnesium you could because everybody's saying that they got the best magnesium.
Sure.
All right. So I'm like, all right. Well, so Matt and I started testing them, and he's a spreadsheet guy, so he gets out the spreadsheet and we start, okay, here's going to be magnesium aspartate. We're going to keep taking that. And here's magnesium malate. We're going to take that. So we tracked individually how much we could take before we would get it. We'd blow out the GI barriers. And then we would test them independently. And then we started stacking them because you get different kind of somatic effects from different ones.
Uh-huh.
And eventually we got tired of having like a whole counter full of magnesium products. It was working. The effects were incredible. Within 3 months, I was feeling I felt almost instantly better, but my sleep scores started going up. I just started feeling calm. I got rid of one of my businesses. I moved out of Panama at the time, went back to a place, that was a little bit more concordant to the things I love. And it was all great. It was just nothing but wins. But it was costing us hundreds of dollars in magnesium every single month to support our supply or our requirements.
You magnesium fiends.
Dude, why don't we make our own magnesium? And why hasn't somebody put all the best magnesiums in one single pill?
Yeah, right.
Like this, and so we said, well, let's do that and see what happens. Well, it turned out that was a little bit harder than we thought, because when you see this, magnesium whatever-tate, I'll use that.
Uh-huh.
That's a bond that's to the magnesium, and that makes a different size molecule, and that means its grain size, how it's stored, how it connects together with other things, and how well it flows into a capsule is going to be impacted by that. And so to try and put the 7 best magnesiums in a single capsule was a problem because, number one, you couldn't get the flow of those in there because of the different sizes. Huh. And most people will use chemical-based excipients, which are flow regulators, right? So when you see all these and they'll use this in other products like magnesium stearate or silicon dioxide, you wonder, why the hell are those things in there? Well, they're actually just to make the stuff flow into the capsule better. Their binders are useless in nature. So we don't do that. We're not into those kind of chemicals. So we're like, okay, so how do we get this into a capsule that flows right? And then we had to, then they would stick in the nozzle. So then we had to find a factory that could handle it from the nozzle to put it in the caps. And then when you put it in the caps, because there were all these different size magnesiums, the caps would break. So we had to get specialized nozzles, specialized caps. We had to get all the different sourcing components that you could put this all in there and then manufacture it. And we did it. Finally, after a while, we did it. And that's where we came up with Magnesium Breakthrough. And so we took it, and it was great because we were getting literally double the effect with half the amount of capsules. So this was a breakthrough. We're like, yay, we've solved this problem. Well, why don't we put a label on it and sell it? Yeah. Probably a lot of other people might like this. We were not prepared for what happened because when people started taking this, the flood of testimonials that came in from, improved sleep, sense of calmness, no muscle twitching, better bowel movements, better not having cramping from PMS. And the reason for that is in North America, particularly, we're completely deficient in magnesium and or sulfur because of the last 80 years of food production. On top of that, living in electromagnetic frequency, so much stimulus in EMFs, as well as blue light and stuff like that, is exhausting our magnesium levels at a higher rate. And this is magnesium's in over 600 different processes, from enzymatic metabolism, relaxation of your muscles, the formation of neurochemicals. It's a really, really important mineral. And we have a high calcium-based diet, and they exist in a 2-to-1 ratio from calcium to magnesium. So if your magnesium levels are low, your body will start dumping calcium, and this is what leads to things like osteoporosis and all of this sort of stuff. So long story short, Magnesium Breakthrough came out. It became a home run hit. Everybody's using it. They all love it. And it's been great to be able to provide that for the world. It hasn't been easy, but it's been truly amazing.
Is there anybody who it wouldn't work for? I mean, is there anybody that, right?
Yeah, sure. You know, any time that you are dealing with a wide dearth of the population, you are going to experience what I call the standard bell curve of deviation of people who, you know, and I'll give you a little inside for our listeners here, the inside baseball on marketing. Whenever a new product, a new service, a new course, a new diet, a new whatever comes out onto the market, what you will see in the testimonial side is the people who are generally at the very far extreme of the positive response. Either they had an extreme deficiency, they didn't absorb very well. That was the key element that, you know, made whatever miraculous thing. And it's a legitimate claim that that person is making. They become a lifelonger. Conversely, on the far end of the spectrum, there is something within that typical product that made someone have a reaction, or they didn't respond right, or something went wrong with it. And those come on the complaint side of your Amazon reviews or whatever, you know, or whatever component. And and then the bulk of the people kind of fall into the middle of that standard distribution on a bell curve. And so we created 2 philosophies to deal with that. Number one, we always want to try and find something that's going to appeal to the widest group of people. Obviously, you're a business person, and that makes sense. Yeah. Number 2, can we make the best product in class? And 3, how do we de-risk it for the people it doesn't work for? And that's where we just give everybody a complete 100% money back guarantee. If they try our product and for any reason it just doesn't do what they expect, it doesn't blow them away, they're not totally amazed and think it was great, well, then we go, oh, thanks for the experiment. We appreciate the feedback. Here's your money back. Please don't let this reflect. Keep doing experiments. We haven't had very many of those in the magnesium component, and either with any of our products, but they come from time to time.
And it's probably because of your point that you made earlier, which is we're not getting magnesium. We're all deprived of it in a massive, massive way, and we're not supplementing it. We're not making up for it. So even if you sat around eating kale and spinach and leafy greens all day long, you still would not get enough that you need. And so when you create and craft a product like this that has all of these different types, of course people are gonna remember that they can sleep and relax and like let go of their stuff. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, based on what I know, in experimenting with supplements and vitamins for, you know, the last 10 years, is that magnesium is the thing. It is the, if there were a panacea, if there was a one size fits all, everybody needs more of this type of thing, it's magnesium. So I'm just going to, this is the best time for me to mention it. So we have a dedicated page. It's magbreakthrough.com/optimal performance. And you can use the code ultimate10. And Wade just said, hey, if you don't like it, you get your money back. No questions asked. That's a pretty cool guarantee.
If I may too, when someone is trying magnesium, I do feel that they would benefit from, we have another philosophy when it comes to supplements: the minimum effective dosage, the maximum effective dosage, and the optimal level. And for the most part, going back to that bucket theory, what you want to do is fill up your bucket as fast as possible that you can without spilling any of the vitamin over the side. And then once you get to a full bucket, you want to titrate down so that you only require the amount that you're burning at that point. And now you're operating from a full bucket as opposed to an empty bucket trying to do that. And it's a very different way of targeting your supplement intake in a way that makes maximum benefits for the dollars that you're spending. So rather than shotgunning 10 products at once, what I'm suggesting to people is do a test, find out which ones you're deficient in, target those ones first, and scale up as fast as you can on those that, under the guidance of your medical professional or your, as I call, your quarterback, that's going to help you determine what's the best rate that you can do that. And then once you get that, then move on and get to a maintenance level and then go to the next one and the next one. And then eventually you kind of just get into, then if you move into something like nootropic enhancers, guess what? Now you're dealing with a full bucket. So anything that you add on top of it, whether it's exercise or fitness or new courses or neurofeedback or whatever performance parameter you're going to add to the component, your results are going to be amplified because your capacity to get results has been improved because of your overall functioning of the system.
Yeah, that is a really cool idea that we have not really explored with any guest before, is the idea that when you are nourished, when you are optimized for performance in what you're consuming, that when it's time to meditate or when it's time to learn something or exercise or pray or just enjoy yourself, you're in a better position to have a better experience because you have all the pieces in play. Oh, that's wonderful. So I want to make this even more obvious for people. When you say figure out what you're deficient in, what should people do?
Again, nothing better than a SpectraCell test. If you're looking for, most guys, for example, or today, or a lot of women as well, are dealing with some sort of hormonal imbalance. So I think a Dutch test can be very revealing because you can also see sometimes, for example, when if you blow out your cortisol levels, chances are you're going to crash your testosterone levels as well, right? And so when that happened to me, I looked at my testosterone levels crashed in concordance because I was running with too much cortisol for all of those parameters. So I cut out one of my businesses. I added magnesium. I freed up some more free time in my life. And then I also added a zinc copper supplement because when we looked at my readings, and I'm illustrating this so people can kind of see the methodology.
Yeah.
Is that we noticed that I had plenty of DHEA, but what was happening in the conversion is instead of going down an androgenic or testosterone-based metabolism path, I wasn't converting the DHA down that pathway. It was getting converted into estrogen. Oh. And so when we filled up my nutrients, got the cortisol regulated through lifestyle and magnesium intervention, and then got the B12 worked out so we had lots of energy. We then added the zinc in the copper, and I got that from Dave Asprey. He's got a really nice zinc copper, and I added that into the diet. And over the course, and the whole process took about 2 years, we're almost at triple my testosterone scores that I had when I crashed. No drugs, no TRT, no supplementation from any of the, those kind of androgenic or testosterone precursors or anything like that. Sure. So had you taken me to an endocrinologist at that point, they would have said, you know what, you're almost 50, testosterone's in the toilet, you just got to get on TRT. Sure. And I was like, yeah, okay, I'm not against that, but can I kick that can as far down the road as I possibly can?
Right, because you can't start over, right? Once you start TRT.
Once you're in, you're in.
Yeah.
And so going back to that full bucket theory, well, I've got some holes in my whole system here. Yeah. So if I address all those first, maybe I can go. So in that case, I also did a couple other tests. And I have an episode with Dr. Paul Maximus, who does my naturopathic doctor testing. There's 5 main tests that everybody really needs to take. A Dutch test, which is a great indication of your hormones. A pulse test, which is basically denatured proteins in your body, which indicate cardiac disease. Homo IR, which regulates both your insulin regular response with glucose response, so insulin and glucose in your body. SpectraCell, which determines how well your body absorbs and utilizes minerals. And then a good old-fashioned DEXA scan, where you can determine your lean body mass, the fat tissues, because obesity is, of course, one of the biggest indicators of comorbidities and development of these things. So there you deal with, basically cancer, heart disease, hormone dysregulation, major nutrient deficiencies that lead to a variety of different conditions, as well as looking at your overall health. Do you have enough muscle? Are you going up in muscle mass or stabilizing and maintaining or decreasing your body fat over time? Those 5 indicators, do that maybe once every 5 years, and I think most people would be able to live their best life.
Oh my God, Wade, this is so useful to people. I think that the simplification, you've really simplified it for people. Like, all right, here's what you do. Like that, I think people need to hear that because it's super overwhelming now. There's so much information out there. There's so many different products. We're being bombarded by ads all day long, and it's just this like too many choices, and people can't really focus, and they don't really know where to start. Now, one thing that I wanted to take the direction here is gut health.
Yes.
For me, and we don't want to talk about my shit, but I've leaky gut, so I'm handling it right. I'm doing some protocols. I purchased your P3OM, and I purchased it because I thought, well, I definitely need to populate my gut with some good cooties. And my wife gets, indigestion and, food, sort of subtle food poisoning from lots of different things, essentially doesn't eat sulfuric vegetables at all because she has such a reaction to it. And so I decided to actually bought like 6 bottles because I was going to hit it hard. And so I've been taking it for like 2 weeks now. My wife's been taking it. My gut is better. My skin is better. My bowel movements are better. And your explanation of how you created this probiotic, it just sounds, you call it the Navy SEALs of probiotics when, I admittedly, I've had Paul Chek on the show before, and you do an ad with him where you explain how you create this. And just like magnesium, everybody needs magnesium. I think everybody has a gut issue. Most of us have some sort of imbalance in our flora. And so I'd love for you to talk about gut health and specifically P3OM, which I'm just a massive fan of now.
Yeah. So, and going back to the Scratch Rich, this is where we cut our teeth. In 2003, after the Mr. Universe contest, following a performance-based diet, after the Mr. Universe contest, I gained 42 pounds of fat and water in 11 weeks. So I went from Mr. Universe to Mr. Marshmallow, and I met a doctor by the name of Dr. Michael O'Brien afterwards, who was the epitome of senior citizen health. He was way up in his 70s. He was vibrant. He had great skin. He was like, he was just everything that you would possibly hope and dream and think that's not possible. And I was like, I attended a lecture with him, and he was challenging many of these things and talking about this. This was like almost 20 years ago now. And I said, I don't get it. I'm at the pinnacle of aesthetic performance. I've got Spartan discipline. I'm doing everything I'm supposed to. What went wrong? And he says, Wade, you've learned to build the body from the outside in. I'm going to show you how to build the body from the inside out. And he said, virtually everybody has compromised digestive system because of our food supply chain, what's happened with monoculture farming, the use of pesticides, chemicals, the overprescription of antibiotics, all which disrupt our digestive, and then the development of genetically modified food dyes, and a laundry list of chemicals that grows by the day. All of this affects how we digest, absorb, and utilize our food. And I do believe the variance within diet selections is because some people can't metabolize different foods because their digestion is so compromised. And Harvard recently released a paper that said that virtually every person in North America has some form of leaky gut to a varying degree. The emergency hospital visit evidence is 13% of the emergency hospital visits are gastrointestinal related issues.
Whoa.
100 million people report some sort of digestive distress on any day.
Wow.
And 25% of those are on prescription medication permanently. Think about that. So we have a digestive health crisis, and I went at it and fixed my own digestion. I started taking enzymes and probiotics and all these sort of things way back 17 years ago. In 6 months, I regained my health and became a firm believer and spent the rest of my life researching and determining and also developing a suite of products. In fact, we have PhDs in a university in Europe who Matt and I provide tests for every single week, where they can test the efficacy of the various crazy experiments that we concoct up. Like, what happens if you bombard things with EMFs? What happens if you give probiotics vitamins and minerals? What happens if you add this prebiotic to it? What if you had that? What if you put a toxin in? What happened? So we just run these tests, and they have the ability to determine it. It's really, really fun stuff.
Nice.
But here's what we learned. So when it came to P3OM, we knew that there was a major variance in people's diets. And we knew that undigested protein was a big problem, because that's what was crossing over in the leaky gut, causing an inflammatory response and an over response of the immune system, thinking it's got a foreign invader. So we're like, okay, well, how do we get this undigested protein out of the diet? And first we started with enzymes, and we developed the world's best proteolytic enzyme blend called Masszymes, which helps break down the protein in the pre-digestive phase, which is very, very critical, because humans cook their food, which eradicated all the enzymes. Second, we knew that hydrochloric acid diminishes in production later on, which is another essential point of disinfecting your body from other pathogens, as well as changing the pH to break down your food. But when it came to bacteria, there's hundreds of strains of bacteria inside your body. And it's like, well, which strain is going to be the best one for you? For example, I'm a plant-based guy, and Matt is a ketogenic guy. If you do a gut map or a biome test on us, we have a whole different array of bacteria in our body. It's completely different.
Right.
So we're like, how do we get something that is going to give the most benefit to the best amount of people? And working with Dr. O'Brien, he'd come up with this crazy idea. And he says, well, he was a former medical doctor and worked in hospitals. And he said, we know that we have all these antibiotic resistant strains of bacteria, because for the last, at that time, the last 60 years, they had been bombarding every kind of pathogenic bacteria with antibiotics, because they worked, and they had to keep increasing the dose. And then eventually a bunch of strains just mutated and said, hey, that stuff, we just eat antibiotics for breakfast. So what he said is, well, what we can learn from that is that, guess what? Bacteria, if they're subjected to even extreme conditions, a certain amount of those will survive. So what if we took some really robust bacteria like L. plantarum, which is a very aggressive strain of bacteria. We throw it in a toxic soup. We run a sine wave through the toxic soup, kind of like as a signal that some of these guys will live. Most will die. When we get done the extraction process, it's almost like a Bud's Navy SEAL training, where they weed out most of the people that go through the program, because they want only the toughest, most robust, most durable components. And because of this sine wave and because of the environment and in the short-term life, you literally have super probiotics. And then we grow them on very special mediums, and we had the ability to test a bunch of different mediums over the years to find out what's the best prebiotic for this. And we actually pack those in a capsule and freeze dry it, and then we deliver it to the system, via a capsule. And now, what's interesting is we were able to get a patent for that particular strain of bacteria. And if and we can go on our website and you can check out what the patent says, because in this highly cancel culture world, we can't legitimately state what the patent says on this strain called L. plantarum OM. We've branded as P3OM, which is patented proteolytic probiotic. But basically what it does is it breaks down protein and it's survivable in the gastrointestinal tract. Now, you can make some extrapolations from that, and we were able to prove some things in that patent study about what these probiotics do. But let's just put it this way: it's very important, because that's the primary level of your immune system.
Yeah.
And so when you start taking P3OM in high dosages, particularly in a compromised state, people start to experience radical transformations in their health, their immune system response. And that's what I did, and it's what we did. I haven't been sick literally since that time. Colds, flu. If I get a little bit of a sniffle or anything, if I'm traveling or run down, I slam a whole bunch. If I get any chance of food poisoning, I've lived all over the world, I feel a little bit odd, I just go home, take a handful of those things right away. It's undefeated against food poisoning. Works really, really well. And it's been an amazing product. And of course, that's the backbone of our probiotic offerings, because it's such a wide verse, and it's attack. It goes in and kills out the bad guys.
Yeah.
And then allows your body to repopulate, assuming you're having a healthy diet. Now, we have other probiotic strains. We have a product called Leaky Gut, which has been proven to repair gut tissue, like that leaks in the mucoid plaque that goes between. And we've actually demonstrated that is also repairable. We have probiotics that make the neurotransmitters in your brain for people that don't have that, because I think a lot of neurotransmitter imbalances is because people don't have the bacteria to make those neurotransmitters. And so we've been just offering all these different things to solve the problems that we experience digestively living in the modern world.
Awesome. So much there, man. I mean, one thing that stands out for me is there is a minimum effective dose. There is a suggested daily dose, and then there is like a therapeutic dose, so a way of looking at it where you can blast it. And 10 capsules of the P3OM is not ridiculous. You can't overdo it. If you ate something funny and you're not feeling well and you're feeling burpy and bloated and funky, or you're running into the bathroom, can you do like 10 of them or 20 of them?
Oh yeah, I've done as much as dump a whole bottle down my throat and experience. I have found for a lot of people though, if they've got severe digestive stress, they're going to do better if they do about a 5 enzyme or 2-to-1 even. Like if you take 2 probiotics, you would be better off to take 4 enzymes with it, 4 Masszymes with it. And the reason why is if you have undigested proteins in the body, there's probably a problem in the pre-digestive stage where it wasn't broken down, and that's why it got into the intestinal tract and leaked through. So oftentimes you're going to do even better if you stack that. And then the trifecta, if you will, is to take Masszymes, P3OM, and hydrochloric acid. And that will wipe out about 90% of the digestive problems that North Americans have right off that. And if that doesn't fix your digestive problems, you probably need medical intervention at that point, because there's something far more serious going on in your body.
Wow. Man, oh man. You're giving people... obviously, you have a lot of fun with this.
Oh, I love it. I mean, I've been doing this for years. My needs as a person are very little. I really love the mission. I got into this because my sister, was 4 years my senior, and she died at 22 years old after 4 years battle with cancer. So as a young man, I learned very quickly that your life isn't a guarantee and your health isn't a guarantee. And having run the performance side of things from an aesthetic perspective as a former bodybuilder, but then transiting into, optimizing health, there's no amount of money that feels as good as a testimonial that you made difference. Like, so if we have great numbers or we have okay numbers, I look at them like, oh, it was a good week. Oh, it was a bad week. But when I hear about the little 65-year-old grandmother who couldn't go out and play bridge with her friends because she always had digestive issues, and then she took one or some of our products, and now she can go play bridge with her friends, it puts a smile on my face all day long. And we read the testimonials out every Monday morning on our company-wide team meeting. We have a company-wide team meeting. We bring them all in, and we want to connect those stories to people, because that's the fun part. That's what makes it. I always find it interesting that there is, for most of the population, other than a few crazies, there is an intrinsic sense of happiness and joy when you make a difference in someone else's life. So I don't know exactly what that biochemical feedback system is, but I think everybody can recognize and they can connect with it, right? And so there's something intrinsic with humans that says that if I help other people, I feel good about that. And so more money is not going to make me a happier person. They've done the research, 150 grand a year is top end for as far as joy is going to make. And that doesn't mean I don't think people should go make all the money that you want, but you're going to find at that point, it's these things like connection, time with people that you love, and these feedback loops where you're making contribution. And I haven't found a ceiling on that. There is no point where I was saying, you know what, I got too many testimonials. I just can't deal with it. If I hear another testimonial, I don't want. I've never ever felt that way.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great guide point for life. And that's also why we also do the de-risking side, because there's nothing worse also if you buy into a product or you try something that we had and maybe it didn't work for you for whatever reason. I don't want that person to give up or quit on the industry or quit on the health because I wasn't able to deliver on something.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm like, hey, we'll give you your money back. Thanks for the try. We don't want that we're still committed to your health over the long term.
Yeah.
And if there's something I can do, whether it's provide them with a product or a service or an expert that might help them, we do that from our company because we're still committed to the end game, which is everybody experiencing their best level of health possible.
Man, can't beat that. Can't beat that. Can't beat that. That's the people listening right now. I'm sure just can't help but vibrate with that and be excited by that. And it's my mission as well in this life is to help people and to help people elevate consciousness, raise their awareness so that they can go do other cool shit for other people. And you're right. Nothing. I mean. Just you telling me earlier in this conversation, hey, that's a really good question. That's it for a podcast host. It's like, okay, I will stop there. He said, good question. That's just like the highest compliment you can get. And it does feel good. It means that you're stimulated and you're enjoying this and having a good time and sharing with your heart. And I absolutely love that. I want to kind of pinpoint something really quick before we kind of wind this thing down and take it home. I find it interesting that you and Matt eat so differently, and the fact that you're plant-based and he's keto, it really is a really interesting dynamic because then you kind of cover your bases. And as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, well, the gut of this person or that person is going to be different. And for myself, who's keto and sort of borderline on carnivore. Most of my nutrients come from proteins because that's what fuels me the best. That's what feels the best right now. I just think that's interesting. Did that happen by chance? Have you modified your dietary approach over time? Do you consume any meat at all?
I haven't had any flesh for 20 years now, and it was part of. I did a little experiment a long time ago and got into the plant thing and then have continually worked on optimizing that because it's not easy, particularly in a performance-based environment. Matt, who grew up consuming a lot of sugar as a kid, and we both believe that he probably blew out his glycolytic enzymatic pathways that makes him not metabolize sugar very well. I metabolize sugar or carbohydrates extremely well. I should have a t-shirt that says carbivore. Like, even though I would say 65 to 70% of the food that I consume comes in the forms of carbohydrates, my blood sugar to glucose ratio is below what most people on a ketogenic diet have.
Whoa, really?
Right? Yeah. So when you do my testing, I come out just A1. And I'm from a northern climate, and I grew up on meat and hunting and fishing and all those things or whatever, living in the woods. So it's kind of odd. I do believe that there is some aspect because I've been enhancing my diet for optimizing digestion, and I ran into all those problems. So it's not like I was just born and everything was working well. So I came back. I do believe though, when you do get your digestive and system really optimized, I think that you have a wider choice of options. It just comes down to what you prefer. Matt prefers the ketogenic lifestyle. For him, it's easy. It works well for him, and power to him. Way back in the day, we used to have all kinds of fights over this, just so you know. Just so we're not like some holier than thou people. We used to argue about all this stuff all the time, him and I, and get into it. And I think that's for whatever reason in today's internet snowflake world where everybody is like hurt by words, I think spirited debate and passionate debate about what you're dealing is where you come to better conclusion and expose the flaws in your thinking.
Yeah.
And anytime that I had experimented with ketogenic diets, I couldn't, the fat in, like Matt's been doing ketogenic for 26, 27 years. Once I hit a certain threshold of fat, it was just coming out in my stool. So I believe that my lipolytic pathways, lipase is the enzyme, was not allowing me to do well on that diet. He actually went off and invented an enzyme formula called Capex, which had 4 different types of lipase. And he says, here, try this. And then I did a plant-based version of the ketogenic diet. And I started skyrocketing my fats. And I didn't have the fat in my stools. And I was like, oh, okay. So, so that was the indication that there was a lipase. And we knew that from him from carbohydrates, and we knew that for me for lipase. And we've seen that repeated over and over and over. And I think where the common ground is for most people, and I think that's where we have 3 great movements in the 3 great categories or movements in the world of health as far as diets, and that is the ketogenic diet, the paleo diet, and the plant-based diet. And then you have spectrums within, bell curves within each one of those. But what I would say is that most everybody says is that you want to have as close to pristine food that you're consuming in an organic, chemical-free, dye-free state, as natural and as local as possible, and supplementing your diet with the nutrients that are not absorbed and utilized by your body or aren't present in that diet.
Yeah.
And as well as maintaining the lifestyle components like movement and proper hydration and deep breathing practices and some form of exercise that you like to do and lots of sunshine, you're good to go.
Yeah.
So if you really look at the lifestyle components of what supposedly these variances in diet,
sure,
there's an 80% concordance, but we're taught to see what's wrong with other people or what's different than other people or what's not in agreement. And I always like, well, if we want to discover principles, what seem to be universally applicable in all of these things? And let's start from there. And then now let's start debating the nuances so that we can arrive at what I would call higher truths or closer approximations to reality, because none of us know what reality actually is. We have our version of it, and no one and everyone's is unique to themselves.
Yeah. Oh man, I love that. That's really high wisdom, and I think that the understanding that when you get some foundations correct, you can have flexibility to eat the way that you want that feels right for you. Get a few of the essentials correctly. Awesome. Well, Wade, I've heard you on other, I've heard a ton of your content, and there's a lot of other directions I wanted to go into, life purpose and spiritual practice and so forth. But I think we'll just have to keep that for part 2, to be respectful of time. But this has been such an eye-opening conversation. You've given us so many solutions. You've given us so many ideas that we can immediately activate on. You've been kind enough to give us, discount codes for your products that I am loving, and I'm going to go back and get some more after this P3O that has helped my wife and I tremendously. So before I ask the last question for the podcast, I'd love for you to just give, where can people get a hold of you? What websites can they go?
Yeah, so they can just kind of come to BiOptimizers. They can go to magnesiumbreakthrough.com, optimal performance. They get the ultimate 10. They get a discount on anything. Actually, not just that product, but anything else. We have a 12-week awesome health course. They can find us on Instagram and Facebook and all that with BiOptimizers. And my team kind of handles all that sort of stuff. And I do the presentations on this stuff to kind of explain it, because I'm so passionate about this and I just love doing these. So thank you for having me as a guest. I really appreciate it, and people like our stuff. But even if they don't buy our products, I would suggest that they check out the 12-week awesome course. That was really 25 years in the industry of how do you sort out first principles. It's 5 to 15-minute videos. There's 12 of them. You can kind of scan through it, and particularly the bucket theory of nutrition, I think, is really good for people to investigate and to rethink of how they approach supplementation.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you. So I can't wait to hear your answer to this one. It's a fill in the blank question, specifically to catch you off guard. And this can be based on anything that you know. This is in your wide experience in the world of health and performance and life and love and peace and joy. Please fill in the blank. Everyone would benefit from knowing
God.
Wade, thanks for joining us today on the Optimal Performance Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Excellent. You know, I've done 180 episodes. Nobody has just said God.
Oh, wow.
You're the first.
Simple.
Yeah.